Would you still walk into a stranger's home if instead of a husband, 5 starving children were waiting and their father had died just 3 days earlier? That's exactly what happened to Claire Dawson. She stepped off a train in the middle of nowhere, clutching a letter from a wealthy man who promised her a new life. He was supposed to meet her. They were supposed to marry. But instead of a wedding, she was met by a 12-year-old boy holding a baby and a single sentence that shattered everything: "My father's dead." No husband, no money, and no way out. What began as a journey for love turned into a battle for survival in a crumbling cabin where whispers of debt, betrayal, and dangerous men lurked behind every door. But Claire didn't run. She stayed. She fed those children with the last food she had, and when the wolves came knocking, she stood between them and the darkness. This is the story of how a woman with nothing gave everything and found more than she ever imagined. Stay with us, because what happens next will challenge what you believe about family courage and what it means to truly belong. When Claire Dawson stepped off the train into the scorched silence of Willow Creek, Texas, she expected to find a man waiting with a ring, a modest home, and a future. What she didn't expect were 5 dirt-streaked children standing alone on the platform, and not a single adult in sight. The wind kicked up a gust of dust that stung her eyes, or maybe it was tears she refused to acknowledge. She clutched the marriage proposal letter from Thomas Walker, a newly wealthy man she had never met in person, but had come to know through long letters in a marriage agency. He promised stability, fresh eggs, laughter, a place to belong. Instead, the only welcome committee was a boy 12 at most with a baby swaddled in his arms and the kind of eyes that had seen far too much. "Are you Claire Dawson?" he asked, voice rough like gravel. She nodded slowly. "Yes, I am." The boy tightened his jaw. "I'm Jake. Thomas was my father." "Was?" Claire blinked. "Was? He died 3 days ago," Jake said flatly. "Heart attack." The words hit her harder than the desert heat. Her knees wobbled and she reached for the wooden post beside the train platform. No, that can't be. He wrote me. He knew he was sick. That's why he wrote you." Jake's voice cracked. "He said maybe you'd still come, even if he didn't make it." Claire turned her gaze to the others. 4 more children, all younger, silent, clinging to one another. A pair of twin girls, maybe 8, held hands so tightly their knuckles turned white. A freckled, redhead boy with a chipped tooth and bruised pride stood off to the side with narrowed eyes. A little girl with tangled, dark hair clutched a torn blanket like it was her lifeline, and the baby in Jake's arms, sleeping unaware that the world had collapsed around him. "Where's your mother?" Claire asked, her voice barely a whisper. Jake shook his head. "Gone. Years ago." Claire's heart crumbled. "Do you have any other family, anyone at all?" "No, just us." Behind her, the train let out a final screech and hiss, as if giving her one last chance to leave. Her fingers itched to turn back, to step onto the train and disappear from this madness. But something in those children's eyes wouldn't let her move. "We live out that way," Jake said, pointing to a stretch of land past the hills. "There's still a roof, barely. You can come see it or go." Claire took a deep breath and looked at the malnourished baby, the shivering girl, the defiant boy, the hopeful twins, and the 12-year-old who spoke like a man, twice his age. "I'm not going anywhere," she said, voice shaking. Jake nodded once and began walking. The others fell in line like soldiers. As she followed them over the dry, cracking earth, Claire's heels sank in the dust. The sun bore down on her neck. Each step forward was a step further from the life she'd imagined, and deeper into something she hadn't yet found the name for. When they finally reached the house, if it could be called, that Claire nearly gasped. The cabin stood slanted, barely held together by warped beams and wishful thinking. One shutter swung in the breeze like a broken jaw. The front door was missing a hinge. A rusted stovepipe leaned sideways from the roof, like it too had given up. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of smoke and mildew. A crooked wooden table sat in the center of the room, surrounded by mismatched stools. 7 empty plates rested in perfect order, like someone had still hoped for a miracle. Jake set the baby down in a makeshift cradle and turned to her. "This was our dad's chair," he said, nodding at a single seat at the head of the table. "It's empty now." Claire swallowed hard, the silence pressing in. Then the smallest girl, the one with the blanket, approached her. Her voice was a whisper. I'm Ava, she said, eyes wide and raw. My mama said I was good at taking care of things. Claire knelt down and brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Then will you help me take care of all of you? Ava nodded solemnly. Claire stood heart-pounding and crossed to the cabinet in what passed as the kitchen. Empty, just dust, a half bag of salt, a tin of what might have once been sugar, nothing to feed 5 children. Without a word, Claire reached into her travel bag and pulled out the last of her provisions, some dried meat herbs wrapped in a cloth and a single cracker. She had saved it for herself, but now it wasn't hers to keep. She boiled water in a battered pot and made the thinnest soup imaginable. As the scent filled the house, something began to shift. The twins Lily and Grace sat at the table without protest. The red-haired boy, Ben, watched her every move like a hawk, unwilling to trust, but unable to look away. Little Tommy, just 3, clutched the edge of the table and whispered, "Is this real?" They ate in silence, reverently like worshippers at an altar. Claire didn't touch a bite. That night she lay on the wooden floor, surrounded by children curled up under patchwork blankets, their tiny chests rising and falling in rhythm. As she stared up at the rafters, one thought pulsed louder than her heartbeat. She came here to find a husband. Instead, she found 5 reasons to stay. I'm so sorry to interrupt the story at this point, especially when we're only just beginning to discover the heartbreak and hope within Claire's journey. But I'd love to know, what would you have done if you were Claire? Would you have stayed or gotten back on that train? And which of the children touched your heart the most so far? Tell me in the comments and let me know which country you're watching from. I'd be so grateful if you hit the like button and share the love so we can keep telling stories that matter. By sunrise, Claire's bones ached from sleeping on the floor, but her mind was already racing. The children were still asleep, tangled in threadbare blankets like fallen stars. Outside, the wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, a chilling reminder of how exposed they were. And yet something had changed. She wasn't just passing through anymore. She was staying. They had no food, no clean water, no way to survive the week. Claire had only one option: go into town and hope someone would help her. But Willow Creek was no place for charity. Jake volunteered to go with her, but Claire insisted he stay. "You're their anchor," she told him. "If I don't come back, they need someone who won't break." Surprisingly, it was Ben, the red-haired boy with the fiery eyes, who stood up and said, "Then I'll go." His voice didn't shake. "I'm not scared." Claire hesitated but saw the truth in his gaze. He wasn't just brave, he was furious. At the world, at the emptiness in the pantry, at a father who died without a plan. She nodded. "All right, Ben, let's go." They walked for nearly an hour. The town appeared like a ghost from the dust, old storefronts, cracked windows, sun-bleached signs. As they passed, people stared. One woman whispered behind a broom. A man at the forge narrowed his eyes. Claire could feel the judgment, heavy and sharp. "Keep your chin up," she whispered to Ben, though her own chin was trembling. They stopped at the general store. The shopkeeper didn't even glance up. "Ain't hiring," he muttered. "I'm not asking for charity," Claire replied. "I can clean, cook, sew, anything. I just need food." He finally looked at her. His eyes lingered on the dirt at the hem of her dress, the sweat on Ben's brow. "Go back where you came from," he sneered. Ben clenched his fists. Claire gripped his arm before he could speak. Door after door, it was the same. Rejection, suspicion, even laughter. Just as Claire was ready to collapse into hopelessness, a voice called out from the edge of the churchyard. "You're the woman from the train." They turned to see an older woman with silver hair pinned in a tight bun. She leaned on a cane, her eyes sharp. "Yes," Claire answered warily. "I'm Claire Dawson." The woman gave her a long, unreadable look. "I'm Martha Collins. Follow me." They walked in silence to a small house with overgrown vines and a warped porch. Inside, it smelled like lavender and old paper. Martha looked at her and said, "I'll give you food, if you clean this place top to bottom and don't whine about it." Claire's eyes filled with tears, but she held them back. Deal. While Claire scrubbed floors and Ben raked the yard, Martha watched. Not with pity, with purpose. At dusk, she gave them a sack of flour, a jar of honey, 2 carrots, and most precious of all, a pouch of seeds. "Don't thank me yet," Martha said, pushing the sack into Ben's arms. "You've just made yourself visible. And around here, that's dangerous." Claire paused. What do you mean? Martha's voice dropped. This town's got wolves. 2 of them already came sniffing around after your fiancé died, said Thomas Odom. Claim the land's theirs now. Claire felt her stomach turn to ice. But it was Thomas's land. Exactly. And now it's yours. That's what scares them. On the way home, the sun slipped behind the hills. Shadows stretched long over the dust. Claire glanced back more than once, certain someone or something was following them. When they finally saw the crooked outline of the cabin, her knees nearly buckled from relief. But then Jake came running. Someone's been here. The front door hung open, the fence was broken. Claire rushed inside. Lily and Grace huddled in the corner, with Ava and little Tommy, safe but shaken. They didn't come in, Jake said. We barricaded it, like you told us. Later that night, as Claire and the children sat close to the hearth, a sound cut through the silence, hooves crunching gravel. Claire and Jake peered through the cracked shutter. A man on horseback sat still at the edge of the hill, watching, not moving. Who is that? Jake whispered. Claire didn't answer. The man turned and vanished into the trees, swallowed by darkness. They're watching us, Jake said, and Claire knew he was right. I'm so sorry to pause the story right here, especially with that stranger watching from the shadows and the threat only growing more dangerous. But before we continue, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you were Claire, would you confront the danger head-on or run to protect the children? Do you think Martha Collins can be trusted, or is she hiding something herself? Tell me in the comments below, and I'd love to know, what country are you watching from? Please tap the like button if this story touched you. Your support means the world and helps us keep telling stories like this one. The next morning came with heavy skies and a silence that pressed against the windows. Claire stood by the wood stove, holding her breath as the water boiled over weak flames. She hadn't slept. None of them had. Every creak in the floorboards, every gust of wind felt like the beginning of something dangerous. Then came the knock. Not a tap. A loud, deliberate knock that made every child freeze where they stood. Jake grabbed a wooden rod. Ben picked up the fire poker. Claire pressed a finger to her lips and moved slowly toward the door. Outside stood 2 men, leather boots, sun-worn hats, and eyes that gleamed with cruelty. One had a pistol at his hip. The other was the same man they'd seen watching from the hilltop. You've got 3 days, the first man said. This land isn't yours. Never was. Get out or we'll take it back ourselves, with or without your permission. Claire didn't flinch. This land belonged to Thomas Walker. He left it to these children. And I'm staying with them, the man sneered. That fool owed more than land. We aim to collect. They walked off without another word, but the message was clear. This wasn't over. Claire's hands trembled as she closed the door. Jake's eyes were wide, but not with fear. With fire. We have to fight back. No, Claire said. We have to survive smart. That evening, she and Jake rode into town to find the only person who might stand against men like that, Thomas's estranged brother, Ethan Walker. The man was a weathered rancher, tall, silent, with eyes like cold steel. He hadn't spoken to Thomas in years. But when Claire told him about the children, about what she saw in their eyes, he didn't argue. Instead, he pulled out a leather-bound journal, yellowed and worn. This was Thomas's, Ethan said quietly. Before he died, he sent it to me. Said if anything happened, it would prove the land belongs to you. Not just by heart, by law. Claire opened the journal, and there in trembling handwriting was the final message. If I'm gone when she arrives, tell her everything I have, this land, this cabin, this family is hers. Because she came when no one else would. Ethan looked up at her. I'll stand with you. They returned to the cabin just as night fell. The children watched Ethan with awe. For the first time, they weren't just defending a broken house, they were defending a home. The next night, the men returned. This time, they came armed and loud. They broke the fence, shouted threats from the shadows, and dared someone to stop them. But Claire, Ethan, and the boys were ready. As the men tried to force the door, Ethan fired a warning shot into the air. Jake and Ben stood shoulder to shoulder, unafraid. The men faltered. One shouted a curse. The other stumbled back when Claire stepped forward with nothing but a lantern and courage in her chest. You don't scare us, she said. We have light. You have nothing. The men backed off, spooked by the noise, the determination, and the sense that they were outnumbered by something invisible. Pride, family, love. In the days that followed, something shifted in Willow Creek. Martha Collins returned with sacks of flour and seeds. The blacksmith came by with nails and planks. Even the sheriff appeared at their gate, tipped his hat, and said, "If anyone else gives you trouble, you send for me." One by one, neighbors brought kindness. They rebuilt the fence, planted carrots, beans, squash. The twins Lily and Grace learned to knead bread. Ava started humming again. Tommy made a game out of chasing chickens someone donated. And Jake, he started smiling. Not often, but when he did, it lit up the whole cabin. Claire stood one evening watching the sun dip below the hills when Ethan joined her, dusty and quiet. "I thought I'd never come back here," he said. "But you've made this place something worth returning to." Claire turned to him. "You're part of it now." He nodded, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a tiny velvet box. "It's not much," he said. "It was my mother's. But I figure, we've already built a family. Maybe we should build a life." Claire felt her throat tighten. No fancy dress, no big ceremony. Just 5 kids laughing inside a cabin that had almost fallen apart. And the man beside her, who had stood with them when it mattered most. "Yes," she whispered. 100 times yes. A week later, they said their vows under the oak tree near the garden. Lily tossed flower petals. Jake held Tommy. Ben stood proudly as best man. And in that moment, under golden sunlight, in a sky full of promise, they were no longer broken pieces. They were whole, and they were home. What would you have done if you were in Claire's place? Take the risk and stay, or walk away before things got worse. Do you believe that sometimes family isn't about blood, but about who chooses to stay? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. How did this story make you feel? If you loved it, drop a no but 3 in the comments. If it wasn't quite right, comment no but 1. And if you're somewhere in between, choose no but 2. Also tell us, where in the world are you watching from today? And if this story moved you, please hit like, tap the heart, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope still exists.